My mother's first language is Spanish, so sometimes when I talk to her in English, she'll forget a word or two, but not a problem. She'll just create new words no one else was brave enough to use. She took my little cousins to the mall once, and this is what she told me when she got back. She was like, it was so cute. I took the kids on one of those, El Horse Tornado or whatever. You know what it is. I'm sorry. El Horse Tornado? I'm gonna need you to elaborate. And she was like, you know what I'm talking about. You put that attitude down, you put it down. I was like, okay, putting it down. Sorry. She said, don't try me. I'll kick your ass. And I was like, you don't need to kick my ass. Just put me in a horse tornado. I'll be terrified. You think you're funny? Mom, how would you act if someone said that to you in Spanish? Tornado de caballos. That sounds horrifying. She was like, okay, that's pretty funny. Merry-go-round, by the way. It was a merry-go-round.
This is why you should choose your friends wisely. I work at a hotel and around 3 p.m. this guest came to check into her prepaid reservation. Despite it being prepaid, we have a $300 security deposit that's mandatory. Her card was declining for the deposit, so we couldn't check her in. She left around 4 p.m. and came back at 11 p.m. with her friend. Her friend spent $100 on an Uber to come to our hotel and put his card down for the deposit so that she could check in. Then he had to Uber back and spend another $100. The next morning, she brought me down a piece of paper filled top to bottom with her demands. She wanted her entire stay comped, additional nights comped in the future, and she wanted free room service. Her reasoning? We didn't let her check in due to her card being declined. We had a back and forth conversation about how I couldn't give her any of those things because her card declined. She kept saying things like, so you're basically blaming me for everything? And how she was a movie producer from London who was traveling, which is why her card declined. When she realized that I wasn't budging, she left the front desk. Luckily, that day was her checkout date, so we wouldn't have to deal with her for much longer. Or so I thought. She called a little later and asked for a late checkout. I told her I couldn't offer that to her because every room was booked up. She got mad and hung up on me. Around 11 a.m., security informed me that a guest was outside bothering the other guests. This is why you should choose your friends wisely. Part 2, why you should choose your friends wisely. While I'm walking over, a few hotel guests tell me that a crazy lady is bothering them. As I walk up to her, she's sitting with 2 random guests. I asked the gentleman if they're okay. They said, it's fine, we're okay. Which is when the lady tells me, the only person bothering them is you. I ignore her and double check with the other guests who confirm that they're okay. That's when she says, bye, you can go now. To which I replied, remember, checkout is at 12. Oh, and if another guest complains about you bothering them, you'll be kicked out of the pool. Eventually, 12 p.m. checkout time hits. I send security to her room first as part of the do-outs. They inform me that her bags are all over the room, but she's not there. We smell cigarettes in her room, and after an inspection, find out that she's been extensively smoking in the room. That's a $500 fee. I authorize the $500 on her friend's card since it's the only one that we have on file. 1 p.m. hits, then 2, and finally she arrives at 6 p.m. I post a $300 checkout fee to her room as well, along with the resort fee totaling $850. When she came back, we told her we couldn't release her things until the cardholder signs authorization for the charges. This is when she throws a huge tantrum and leaves. However, it doesn't end there. Part 3, why you should choose your friends wisely. The next day, I get a call from the crazy lady's friend asking why he's being charged $850. I tell him everything and he's in shock. He said that she's having a midlife crisis right now and her mental state isn't normal at the moment. He then said the $850 charge is outrageous, followed by not knowing what he signed up for when he put his card down. I told him that putting his card down for her was essentially him taking responsibility for her reservation. I explained that I feel bad about it, but charging his card wasn't my decision. I also said that since we couldn't release her items to her, her bags are still in the room. Also, that the card on file will continue to be charged for each day the bags remain in the room. We'll only move the bags out of the room once we get an authorization form signed for the charges. He said he'd gladly pay the $350 for the late checkout, but the $500 smoking fee was too much. He threatened to open a dispute with his bank if he's charged for the full $850. I spoke to my general manager and the most we could do was offer him 50% off of the smoking fee. I also let him know that if he tried to dispute the charges, the hotel would pursue payment in court. He ended up accepting and signing for the charges. We took her bags out of the room and the crazy lady came to pick them up at 3 in the morning. Overall, I just felt really bad for her friend. Story time about the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. My fiance Jack and I moved into a new house and decided to have a housewarming party. He invited his coworkers and his family, and I invited my mom and some girlfriends. I was a little nervous about Jack's family being there because I always felt like they didn't like me. I know he really wanted them there and he was proud of our new place, so I didn't make a fuss about it. I decided I'd try to make a good impression during the party. To my surprise, his parents came up to me and began talking to me straight away. They were being very nice and pleasant. Things seemed to be going well. Jack had just installed new surround sound speakers throughout the house and wanted me to put on some music to show it off. I had my phone hooked up to the TV and was playing music videos for the party. I remember Jack's parents loved Queen, so I put on a few of their videos next, which they enjoyed. Everything was going great. That's when I remembered I forgot to post my video that day for my OnlyFans, which was my main source of income. I excused myself from the party and went to the bedroom to upload my newest video. Jack and I worked hard on this one and it was freaky, so I was expecting it to be a hit. I was editing it and adding the finishing touches on my phone when suddenly Jack rushed into the room frantic. He immediately yelled, "Turn it off!" I looked at him confused and he said, "Your phone's screen mirroring is hooked up to the TV and it's playing in the living room." My heart sank into my stomach and I was mortified. Part 2 of the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. I forgot my phone was connected via screen mirroring to the TV and surround sound speakers. The whole party just saw my newest OnlyFans video starring Jack and I, including his coworkers, my mom, and his parents who already didn't like me. I was so embarrassed I couldn't even speak. My face was as white as a ghost and I honestly wanted to be anywhere in the world but there. No one knew about my OnlyFans, but they sure did now. I knew Jack's parents for sure hated me at this point and I didn't even know what my mom was going to say. I locked myself in the bathroom to calm down. I knew I was going to have to go out and face the whole party that just saw me getting down in the bedroom. I went out there and pretended like nothing happened, and for the most part, so did the rest of the party. Except for Jack's parents. They didn't say anything, but they refused to make eye contact with me for the rest of the night and made it super awkward. My mom asked me in private what happened, and I explained to her what I did for extra income. She was actually supportive and impressed when I told her how much I typically make from it. Jack told me later that his coworkers commented on how good I looked, and one of them even asked for the link so he could subscribe, which I thought was really weird. All in all, it was the most embarrassing moment of my life. I try not to think about it, but it's definitely something I'll never forget.
Time about how my neighbor killed my dog. So a little background information. When I was about 3 years old, my parents got me a German Shepherd. And my neighbors who lived next to us absolutely loved our dog. And so did their kids. Like their dad literally put a doggy door in the fence, so that way our dog could go back and forth from our house to his house. Well, when I was about 8 years old, my neighbors decided to sell their house. So he told us that he had to take out the doggy door because the people that were buying his house hated animals. Well, the people who had just bought his house, they ended up moving in before he could take out the doggy door. So our new neighbors asked us if we could put like a piece of plywood in front of the door so that way our dog couldn't get through. And they said that they would do the same to their side of the fence. So my dad said, yeah, he put a piece of plywood in front of there. Well, my dog, Gabe, the one night that my brother let him out, he ended up getting the plywood off of the doggy door. Well, my brother literally had to crawl through the doggy door to get the dog before one of them saw him in the yard. Like for story time about how my neighbor, part 2 about how my neighbors killed my dog. So like I said, my brother let the dog out and my dog got the piece of plywood off of the door. And my brother had to crawl through the doggy door to get my dog out of our neighbor's yard. So that way our neighbors wouldn't wake up and know that he got through. But whenever my brother went to go get Gabe, he realized that my neighbors didn't even have a piece of plywood on their side of the fence or anything. So my brother told my dad, and my dad went over there the next day to talk to them. And he pretty much said, I'm not going to have a piece of fucking plywood on my side of the fence if you're not going to be doing anything on yours to prevent my dog from going into your yard. And they were like, oh, well, your old neighbors never took out the doggy door. And my dad was like, that's not our fucking fault. Well, then our new neighbors said, if your dog all of a sudden becomes sick or just does not come back, don't be surprised. My dad decided to replace the door himself. Well, once Gabe realized that the doggy door was gone, when we would let him outside, he would literally just sit there and bark at the fence. Well, 2 weeks later, Gabe ended up passing away. And we found out it's because our neighbors were giving him rat poison.
Storytime about the craziest thing that happened to me while solo traveling. I never got to go anywhere when I was growing up. I never even left my hometown until I was old enough to make my own money. When I started working, I booked a trip to Europe with my first few paychecks and had an amazing time. After that, I got the travel bug and decided that I wanted to see the world and kept solo traveling. I decided I was going to Japan next because it's always been on my bucket list. I learned a few words in Japanese to get me by and hope for the best. I hopped on a plane from LAX and settled in for my 12-hour flight. As I was waiting for the plane to fill up, a young Asian guy took the seat right next to me. He was really handsome and I caught myself staring at him for a minute. I guess he caught me too because he ended up smiling back at me. I extended my hand and introduced myself. I immediately realized that he didn't speak English and he must have been visiting LA from Japan. We started talking using a translator on my phone. He told me his name was Haru. It turns out he owns a clothing brand in Tokyo and he was visiting LA for a business opportunity. We ended up talking and lightly flirting back and forth throughout most of the flight. He offered to show me around the city and take me to all the best spots when we arrived. Since I didn't know my way around, I gladly accepted his offer. If only I knew then what I was getting myself into. Part 2 of the craziest thing that happened to me while solo traveling. After a long but surprisingly fun flight, Haru and I arrived in Tokyo. He helped me find my bags and get me to my ride. We exchanged phone numbers and planned to meet up the next day. I couldn't wait to see him again and explore the city with a cute local. As soon as I met back up with Haru, I knew instantly that this man was well off. He picked me up in a flashy car and told me that he was taking me to his favorite restaurant in the city. I could tell that he was trying to impress me, and it was working. After we ate, he took me to some of the touristy places in Tokyo that I wanted to see, as well as some of the obscure local favorites he wanted to show me. It was challenging communicating using only a translator on my phone, but also kind of fun, and we made it work. I ended up seeing him every day I was in the city. By the second week, I was staying at his place instead of my hotel. Haru even convinced me to reschedule my flight and stay in the city at his place for an extra 2 weeks. By the end of the trip, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and of course I said yes. I definitely wasn't expecting to fall in love when I planned my trip to Tokyo, but here we are. Fast forward 3 years later and we're still together and happy. If you're planning to book that trip you've been dreaming about, just do it. You never know what you might miss out on.
How I crashed my dad's really expensive car. So a little background information. My mom had just got remarried to my stepdad 3 years ago, and he was this rich asshole who owned a bunch of food trucks and thought he was the shit. Well, at the time I also had a boyfriend. And we had only been dating for like a month and a half.
My boyfriend would always beg me to let him drive my stepdad's car. And I always said no because that was like his child. Like he had children. He could care less about them. His car was more important. Anyway, so the one weekend my parents were out of town and one of my friends was throwing a graduation party. So that whole day my boyfriend was trying to talk me into taking the car. And I already knew where my stepdad hid the keys. So I just decided I wouldn't drink that night and I would just take the car. He kept asking me if he could drive, but clearly I said no. Because this kid literally told me that he crashed the first 2 cars that he had. So we get to the party, we're having a good time, and one of my friends tells me that everybody's taking pictures with my car outside. Like for part 2.
Part 2 about how I crashed my dad's very expensive car. So like I said, everybody's taking pictures of the car, but I decided to let it go at first. I mean, there was one point where I went outside just so that way I could kind of let everybody know, hey, you're taking pictures with my car. Well, half an hour later, my boyfriend and I decided to leave, and he's obliterated. Like, we probably got 50 feet from her house, and then I had to stop the car so that way he could get out and throw up in somebody's yard. Anyway, so he gets in the car, we're on the way back to my house, and my house was like a 20-minute drive away. Well, we were 5 minutes from my house. At this one intersection, I get a green light and I go to make a right, and I accidentally hit a car turning out of the bar parking lot. So I'm literally freaking the fuck out. And my boyfriend's in the seat next to me crying for some reason. So the guy in the other car calls the cops. The cops show up, they call my stepdad and my mom. My boyfriend went to the hospital, he had alcohol poisoning. Well, my boyfriend told his mom that it was all my fault and I'm grounded for 6 months. Part 2